There,
There.
there
Oh,
we go.
it's live.
Hi, everyone. We are now being recorded.
For the whole internet to see.
Yes, for the whole internet to see. So,
Yeah.
you want to do the introduction, Herb?
I don't think there's
Mm,
anyone on here yet, though.
It doesn't have to be. You're still recording a live video now. You may want to trim it
Oh,
later.
yep. So no doubt about it. Yep. People were here already. And okay, that's a read loop. So we're live, and welcome everyone. I guess this is our second, third hangout. I'm not sure, but our first live AMA with Stephan Morse. And I probably butchered his name because I don't know how to speak. But welcome. I'll leave you to Snow because she is our host today.
right. Let's
And
try that. Alright, so I guess we all know Stephan Morse as Frustrated Ego. I don't know how you want people to know you. Do you want to maybe give us a short introduction?
Sure. I've been writing on Royal Road for a little over a year under the Frustrated Ego name. Started publishing my works live, so it became kind of obvious. My real name is Stephan Morse, and did a pretty good job with it, Kurt. Don't worry. So I don't care. People can call me either one. I have another group I hang out with. They call me Iron because FE apparently means iron. I was like, oh, that's neat. It doesn't really matter. I respond to Hey You or Steph Train as well. So I haven't heard that one since high school. So there you go.
Is there any reason you chose Frustrated Ego as your, is it pseudonym you can say it, or
Alias is fine, or I guess writing name for online stuff.
alias?
I chose Frustrated Ego. I used to go by Silver Ego because gold was taken, and I didn't see myself as a first place sort of person. Then I went somewhere else, and silver was already taken. And like every other name, but I got really frustrated, and I'm like, that's it. I'm picking this. And Frustrated Ego was born. So, there you go.
Alright, I guess we should start with the most important question. Do you play Pokemon Go?
It's a very
Just kidding.
important question. And yes, I
Yeah,
do.
just kidding. On the here, what did what motivates you to write?
For me, it was a lot of seeing a million other works in the same genres. The first story I ever wrote was a urban fantasy. It's on Royal Road. It's called Royal Scales, and I was reading a ton of urban fantasy at the time. And I said, well, you know what? I like this genre, and I want to see something else in it, some my take on it, my twist on the situation. That's how I ended up writing. If we continue online, the main story that you may have questions about today. Uh, I read a lot of virtual reality sort of things, and I learned later on the genre was called lit RPG. And I read so much that I disliked half of them, loved the other half, and wanted to do something of my own in that series. So I did.
Was Royal Road the first place you published anything online?
I think I published on my WordPress about 2 weeks beforehand, um, and I had been part of a small writing groups and communities, forums. There was a game called Horizons that went very, very bad during its launch like a decade ago, and I did a lot of writing there and little role play threads with other people. So I had
So
practice.
is that where you first started then?
Pretty much the first place. I think there were a couple scribbled out pieces of paper back when I was, in fifth grade or something like that. But the first online writing was probably with the Horizons board group.
That's pretty cool. So what made you decide to actually put your stuff online for other people to read?
I got tired of my wife telling me to post it or shut up. Um,
It's your pretty much your support group.
she was very supportive, yes. But there was a certain point where I would just write a whole bunch of stuff and then keep it quietly to myself and dream big. Eventually, she said, "That's enough. You got to put your money where your mouth is. Internet postings where your desire is." That's what ended up happening. I started posting them online somewhere.
Well, we're obviously very happy you did that. I mean, there's a lot of people here that do read your work.
That was
A lot of
So,
people.
yeah, a lot of people. How many books do you have out so far?
I have 6 that are actually pardon, 5 that are self-published on Amazon. The 6th one is that Vocaloid with his mic.
Don't know. If you did send me up from out.
Right. Well, I think a lot of the people that are listening here, they're actually writers themselves, and they see you as like a big motivation because I think a lot of us have a lot of trouble actually writing. I think that a lot of us lose our patience or motivation. So, what keeps you motivated?
There's a lot of different things. I remember at one point, many, many months ago, I asked Curve what the average lifespan of a Royal Road user was for their first posting to last posting and then vanishing off into. I'm pretty sure he ended up like 3.5 months was the average, and I said, well, okay, I'm beyond that. I'm happy about part of it. And the next goal became, well, I want to finish a story. I want to see it reach an ending. Whether the ending is perfect or the most poignant thing ever, I can't necessarily worry about that versus finishing it. So my motivation, in most cases, is being done with the story, knowing that I reached an ending, and not letting myself be one of the millions of people who starts a story and doesn't finish it. I'm not saying there isn't something to that, but I did not want that for myself.
After 5 or 6 novels that you say you have now, do you have a particular writing style that you follow? Like, do you plan it all beforehand, or do you just go by the hotel? I don't know the saying, but you know what I mean.
When I was first started writing, we called it discovery writing. You basically would just start somewhere and then you keep going and add in more elements and add in more and add in more. For me, I need to know where the story is going to end. I consider it like driving cross country. I need to know whether I'm going to end up in New York or San Francisco, and everything between there is an adventure, but I know where I want to end up. So that's how I try to write and approach my writing.
So you're more of a person that plans it out rather than someone that just wings it as they go along.
If I understood that right, I plan out the ending portion and the feel of the scene. There are a lot of elements that come up during the course of writing that I simply could not plan for even if I wanted to. Whether it be how the characters interact with each other, whether I hit a roadblock and I need to figure out what else is going on in the world to move forward. Whatever the case may be, I can't plan for everything. I think if I could, it would probably ruin half the fun of writing for me.
What is your editing process like? Like when you finish writing something, do you just you throw a lot of scenes out? You keep most of what you write?
I sob a lot during the editing process. Usually, when I'm approaching a chapter, at least with Continue Online, my goal was to reach a set in the scene. Okay. Anyway, my goal was to reach a set spot in the scene by the end of the reading for that or that day. So I would plan out, well, here are kind of some of the things I want to talk about, and I would start writing through that portion. And I apologize, I may have lost the original point of the question.
Oh, the question was, what's your editing process like?
Okay, so when I would write out the scene, I would go back and I would look at it and say, well, did I accomplish what I wanted to? Did I have too much extra stuff? Sometimes I would look at a scene and be like, well, this did not end in the spot that I wanted it to, didn't come out right, or portions that I wanted to get in there simply won't fit. So I would have to cut things, yes. There were a lot of things, especially when writing Continue Online, which is the finished series that I've started, or pardon, the finished series on Royal Road. There were things that just didn't happen that I wanted to. And then after I would get done with it and look at it once or twice, I would hand it over to my wife, and my wife would go, well, this part right here, this is fantastic, and you need to redo it. She used a different word than fantastic sometimes. There was a lot of back and forth, and then I put it out and go from there.
So we have a question from Emily Brown here. She's asking, where did you get the ideas for your characters? Where did they come from?
They come from all over. For example, the main character of Continue Online, character Grant Legate, who's a very depressive individual and usually chases off a lot of people. He came from a short story I wrote that was maybe 2,000 or 3,000 words long, tops, back when I was 18 and a very emotional child. So I took a character that I had already developed and plugged him into a setting that was already existing. So sometimes it's just stuff that I've had laying around. Other times I will steal people that I've seen on TV. I'll use one of the voices as an example. I have one in there named Vlad, and he is shamelessly modeled after, of course now I can't remember the Old Spice commercials, Terry Crews.
Oh, he's a good model.
I shamelessly modeled a guy after that. There's parts where he's just like yelling loud words and stuff like that. So yeah, I do look for inspiration in those kind of cases. There's other people, I will model them with certain actors in mind. Like one of the voices is named James. He's, again, shamelessly modeled after James Earl Jones in my brain, with different personality traits, different talking and stuff like that. But he's a great actor, and if I had my way, I'd see him in that role. But it's not going to happen. We're past that stage. So, I look all around for that kind of stuff.
Do you draw a lot on real life things that happen to you personally?
Not in the slightest.
Yeah. All right. Another question that I see here is, how has your experience been publishing? Like, where did you even find out how to start getting your work out there?
There's two different Reddits that I look into. One is for writing, and one is Reddit for actual self-posting, or self-publishing, sorry. I think it's actually just Reddit/r writing/self-publish, something like that. I have them marked on my Reddit account. So we look through those posts, we see what kind of stuff other people run into. Eventually, at some point, we went to the Amazon website, since they're the primary person for anybody EPUBing out there at all in the world. And their process is so freakishly straightforward, it almost seems like a trap. But it's been very, very good overall. So it's, despite my weariness with how easily I can fill in the blanks and check boxes, the self-publishing process took less effort than I expected to get the final work out there. Feedback, of course, and getting final edits and covers and that kind of stuff, that's a whole other bit of insanity. But actually publishing the work, really, really easy. And then finding people who want to buy it.
What is that like? Do you have any marketing that you do outside of Royal Road, or how do you do that?
Me personally, no. And I say personally because my wife has done a metric ton of stuff. I think she took over my Facebook account, so if anybody here is reading this from the Facebook posting, I didn't post that, she did. And she's been putting out all sorts of little notices saying, here's the next book coming out, because she's trying to help with the whole process. And it's fantastic, because I stare at a wall when it comes to this stuff. But most of what I've relied on is, honestly, I apologize, the serial format of Royal Road, posting there, and then letting people know when the first book came out. And then from there, it started getting tied into all the other lit RPG books that are out there on Amazon, of which there is a very definite group that is growing in size. So I've relied on a lot of Amazon's algorithms to catch on to that kind of stuff.
Someone said that you took your Continue Online books off of Royal Road after you published it on Amazon.
Yeah, the timing is a bit against me on this one, but part of KDP's Select program, which I ended up enrolling in after publishing. So there was about 4 months where Book One, A Continue Online was published, and it wasn't part of the KDP Select program. But then I started reading through the terms of the KDP Select. I opted in, and I found out while reading through the terms that I needed to make sure all of my other online sources for this were temporarily removed or suspended, because it's an exclusivity issue. And to anybody who's looking at self-publishing, if you honestly have a following. I can tell you now from my point of view, because I'm saying this because I'm sure someone wants to know. The KDP Select program was too valuable for me to pass up, so I had to remove the content at this stage because it gets the word out. It gets more popularity on the Amazon side. More people see the work. So.
Do you see a lot of difference between like how much readers you get from KDP versus just the normal Amazon sales?
Yeah, the numbers end up being about. I'm trying to think of an easy example. About 7 people will read a book on average through the KDP Select to every 5 who buy a copy, something like that. Maybe every 4 who buy a copy. So I get more reads through. It's a little hard to gauge than I do purchases of the book.
That's pretty cool. I'm doing the questions totally out of order here, and I know it's completely out of line, but I'm just sort of trying to find the ones that I find interesting at the time. So another question I see here is, how do you manage to pump out such well-fleshed stories regularly?
Dumb luck. I've the project Continue Online specifically is literally for the last year and change absorbed a good portion of my headspace. And what I mean by that is I would go to work and I would come home and then I would kind of stare at a wall because my brain is thinking about the storyline and the characters and where they go next and all of that information. So I frequently got lost thinking about it. I'm pretty sure I spent more time working on the Continue Online series than I did on my full-time job. And somewhere in there, I mean, I'm trying to help my wife with things because we're now 9 months pregnant. She could run in here at any moment and say, you know, we're going to the hospital, in which case I'll escape out the door. So I've had
Congratulations.
Yeah, I've had my 4-year-old that I try to hang out with at least a couple hours every day, at least on the weekends. It's harder in my commute during the week, but I just spend a lot of time thinking about the stuff and a lot of time typing out the next part of the story. So for Royal Road people, if you're looking at it and saying, well, what do I need to do to make my characters work better? What do I need to do to make the story go reach the ending? The answer is you keep writing, and then you keep writing, and then you keep writing, and you will discover all sorts of things about your characters.
Do you ever plan on having writing be your full-time thing, or is it always going to be a side job for you?
Well, if some major motion studio comes up to my doorstep and says, you know, hey, we want to buy the rights for this, and it's more than what I make at my job, yeah, I'll probably switch to full-time at that point. But for now, it's going to remain secondary. I need all the benefits of my job. I need the security of that stuff. So, and I'm afraid that if it becomes a full-time thing, it'll be much more stressful. At least at this point, I can enjoy it and I can step back and take a breath and go, okay, well, you know what? I'm going to sleep today. I don't have to crank out another 1.5 million words tonight. So.
There was a question here a while ago from SR Novels. He was asking, how did you get the idea for Continue Online, which is your series with the most books out?
That's the more popular one, yeah. Most people probably don't know my other little works yet, based on the figures I see on Royal Road, which is fine. At least until one of you, either you or Kana, gets that author page working, right?
Yeah, soon, very soon. It's actually one of the plans.
I'm sure it's in there somewhere. So the question was, how do I get the idea for Continue Online?
Yeah.
There's not an easy answer because part of it is you just read a lot in the genre and you see all sorts of things that you want to have, you know, characters that the other stories out there write, they turn left, and you're like, well, that's great. What happens if you would have turned right? You know, what happens if you would have just walked off from that argument instead of getting into a fight that does nothing? You know, or whatever the case may be. And I know when I was originally approaching the idea of writing Continue Online, I wanted to see a more, how do I phrase this? Something that doesn't have a translated vibe to it. Like, there's a lot of works that are translated in the lit RPG genre, which is fine. They have something to offer. A lot of them. Some don't. But I wanted to write something that was had more to do with what's outside the box, the impact virtual reality has on things. And I didn't want it to be just about the game either. It's not just go in there and grind another level. So I had to find a character that would help me present that kind of idea, and then find a setup that would allow me to explore more than just what I consider a hack and slash RPG. Because there's like Diablo, which is just you go fight a bunch of things over and over and over and over and over again, and it's the same story, rinse and repeat with a new backdrop. And then there's something more expansive like Baldur's Gate, which has an ever-changing story that just keeps moving forward. So I wanted to see more of the latter type of RPG in virtual reality, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
I think that makes sense.
I'm not.
I hope so. Sometimes I answer these questions and my brain's like, oh, I'm rambling. And I can't go back and edit what I'm speaking, so I can't delete out the extra sentences.
No, you can ramble as much as you want, actually. It's very good right now. So there are many questions here
Oh, God.
people are asking. Yeah. There's a question here from Chizu. He's asking, where do you pull ideas for your world building? Which
Like for the main series or any other specific one, does it say?
I think it's in general, I guess.
A lot of times I will look at what other works have done in the setting. Royal Scales is a big example of this. I was watching, I was reading the books that True Blood is based on. So if you've seen True Blood, it's vampires, werewolves, and fairies. Oh my! And there's a whole bunch of these novels as well. So I looked at them and I said, well, all these books in this genre have the same setting. You see, and I apologize. Let me get my thoughts in this order. You see the same concept. You see, vampires enter society, they do this, and here we are as a result. And humanity's freaking out, and vampires are like, we want peace and occasional blood, or whatever. So I would look at the basic setting premise and then just add on my own uniqueness from there. In the case of Royal Scales, I ended up making it so that elves all had crazy addictions. Every single one had some random addiction to something. There's some pretty explicit ones, and then there's some very peaceful ones. Like they walk out the door and they have to turn around 3 times and then bow. It's like OCD. So I wanted to make sure I had something unique in all those stories. And I did the same with Continue Online. I looked at all the other VR settings out there and I said, well, how can I make this unique? Instead of just one AI that watches over the entire program, there's now hundreds. Yay! And you get a chance to different ones. You get to see a world, and I think I added in things like autopilot. How do we have a virtual reality world that theoretically is constantly changing because everybody loves that idea? That's an accepted premise in the VR series. So how do you have your character just vanish from the world, and then suddenly a war happens, and you come back, 2 days later after you've slept, had a drink, went to work, or whatever, to find your character coming back in the middle of a ruined town? Well, I added autopilot, so your character did something useful while they were offline, or maybe they didn't do something useful, whatever. Like you look at the other works that are in the setting, you say, what did they do? What did you like? What didn't you like? And then you adapt to whatever you feel you want to write.
Yeah, that's actually quite cool. I've never thought about. I always worked with the premise that in those worlds, the AI or whatever you want to call the NPCs, they were expecting you to disappear or at some point or another. But another pilot idea, it's quite awesome actually.
I think I did it so you could set it up either way. Like I want to say maybe the 3rd chapter of Continue Online, they run into the niece, part of the outside of the game plot, and her character was on autopilot, and she had done some singing competition, and then botched it and had a horrible result. So she logs back in, and she sees this depressive, you failed to sing your best, and you gained 3 fans, a stalker, 5 fame, and spend the last hour crafting a rope to hang yourself with because your character is very depressed now. Congratulations, autopilot. It's obviously it's not intended to be serious, but that's the idea, is that whatever you've done in game, whatever kind of patterns you follow, your autopilot does the same thing to a lesser degree. So it was fun to put that in there.
Are all of your stories right? Am I
Go
allowed to
ahead.
say something? Are all of your stories right now based out of VR, or are you looking into making any worlds outside of that genre?
I definitely do stuff outside that genre, so this goes into my other works that nobody knows about. Royal Scales is an urban fantasy, so it's not virtual reality at all. In fact, I don't think the main character knows how to operate anything more complicated than a toaster. I have another one called The Fiasco, which a few people have read. It's a superhero character. His power is that he attracts superhero disasters, whether he wants to or not. So he's always guaranteed to survive them, but constantly things around him are just going to hell. So that's fun. I have one that I've talked about in the Royal Road chat room before, and it's actually me being serious with this. But I'm taking the cultivation genre, where you're like ascending to godhood or whatever, and I'm putting in like
Oh no, not you too.
no, I'm putting in a horror aspect. So I'm looking for like Call of Cthulhu sort of stuff, where these people that are cultivating are secretly becoming otherworldly demons that have no relation to humans. You know, every time they absorb plants, it's really some like space virus or something like that that just makes them think they're stronger. I'm gonna work on that one. I like the premise of combining that genre with horror, but I'm not going past like the main character. If he ever ascends to being a god, you're just not going to hear about him anymore. He's done. It's beyond your realm of comprehension. I'm not going to be like, oh, he's a god, then a super god, then a high god, super god, and then like a mega, super high, mega, whatever, and you just keep tilting the camera up higher. No. But they're going to be fun. I just have to find time to write them.
Well, going by these stories that I've never heard about that you had, and by the fact that I'm kind of super jealous of you that you're able to actually finish all these stories and I can't even finish one, are there any other stories out there that you've killed or dropped or put on hiatus? This is a question from SR Novels.
The main ones that are out there now are ones that I'm confident I can finish. I do have other stories that I've buried in trunks that will never see the light of day. They won't be published anywhere until I like, burn them and then try to make something usable from the ashes. But there's not too many of those. I do have a lot of notes for other stuff once I finish more projects and free up more time. But that's for when I don't know. That's a next year question, the year after that.
Alright, let's see what else. How do you develop the emotional mindset for your characters? For example, the MC of Continue Online and his whole emotional background, etc. By Charlie Langley. He wants to know this.
It's a good question, and I've had people ask me whether I have any sort of personal experience from it. For anybody out there who hasn't read Continue Online, the main character, I'll try to give you a brief summary. He basically had this love interest that he was following, kind of like a lost puppy dog, from really little in school all the way up until they were 30. They remained friends, and at some point they got engaged. So he has this person he's known for a good portion of his life. It's very central to him. And then she gets hit, or not hit, but she dies in a train wreck, along with their like 2-month-old child that he didn't know about. So I have this horribly, like this man 3 years later after this train wreck who's just like trying to recover from the center of his life being dead. And he's in a really depressive spot. And I know a lot of people that have read book one or tried to read book one, they're just like, oh my god, this is so sad. I want to hear about him murdering things. Show me character growth. And a lot of it is me. I have to constantly look back at my characters. I have to look at what they've done since I started the book. Like book one of Continue Online takes place in about a week and a half real time. So people, by the end of the book, are like, well, why hasn't he changed as a character? He's still mopey. And then I want to reach through the monitor and kindly explain to them.
You mean strangle them? Tell them to pay attention?
I'm trying to be polite here. That it's been a week and a half. I know you read a lot, but it hasn't been that long for the characters. So I always have to kind of rewind, see where they are, see what's changed. but I don't have personal experiences to draw on from that kind of stuff. I did a lot of research about depression. I read some or watched some really good TED Talk videos. If you've never seen TED Talks, it's capital TED. They have a whole YouTube channel, and there's a bunch for depression. You hear these people speaking about it firsthand, and that helps me get in the mindset of, here's a person who's survived this, or I should say is surviving this, and what they're doing to cope with it, how they come about it. So a lot of times when I'm trying to get myself into the mindset, I simply research the topic as much as I can until I feel broken enough to write it correctly.
That sounds a little bit depressing.
It is for the first book or two. It gets better. It gets better, I promise.
It gets better? Okay.
Yeah, by the end of it, he's a hero. Okay, I'm not going to let him be depressed and sad and broken for that long. He's a hero.
Well, to get people on Royal Road to like it, you have to give him some kind of OP tendencies. But anyway.
I won't ruin the ending, but yes, he's a hero by the end.
Speaking of Royal Road, though, do you read anything still? Like, you obviously read a lot because, anyone who writes reads a lot. What is your favorite story on Royal Road, if you still read on there?
There were a couple that I read and thoroughly enjoyed, not because they were the greatest piece of works ever, but because they offered something that was very new to me. And I think I ended up doing a review on like 2 of them under my alt account. I want to say one was like Mystery of the Dungeon or something like that. And the story itself is kind of, like, I didn't care about the characters. I just enjoyed what they were doing with it, which is something about they were controlling armies and evolving armies. And the way they just described it all out and the AIs within the game was really neat. I was like, yay, I can enjoy this aspect of this Royal Road book. But a lot of times when it comes to Royal Road novels, I will glom onto one thing. I'll be like, well, this one thing is the reason that I'm going to keep reading through it. And these other 4 things over here that irk me, I'm just going to try to pretend they don't exist because I enjoy whatever that one thing is. If I were to pick a few works, I hate to be a fanboy. I do like the game. I really do. At least until the end of the 2nd book, which got a little bit intense with the whole hacking level thing. If you've read it, it goes. There's like 3 different layers he's talking about being on at the same time, and I'm lost to a certain point.
Too much Inception.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I was like, what are you doing? I enjoyed it up until then. Usually I can find at least one thing about the story that is interesting enough to read, and that's what I look for. Even when I'm doing reviews for the group or whatever Curve and Argos decided we're called now, brilliant people. Even when I'm doing the reviews for those, I'll still find at least one thing like, hey, this is kind of interesting. And then there's everything else.
I find it interesting that so many stars on Railroad have that unique thing that you'll say, okay, this was a great idea. I wish they would have worked this better. It's very impressive.
All right, so you're talking. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when you're reading all those books, as a writer, you're putting together like 5 or 6 ideas that you think are really neat. But when your readers are going through it, they may glom onto just one idea. Well, as a writer, you're trying to navigate the other 5 or 4 as well. So it's easy to lose the thread of stuff. It really is. Sorry.
No. Hey, you're our guest here. I'm supposed to like shut up as soon as you start talking. Okay. So urban fantasy you're talking about. I've never actually read that much urban fantasy, but what's your favorite genre? Someone asked that.
It changes year to year. It really does. 3 years ago, my favorite genre was superheroes. Anything with superheroes, I ran through pretty much all of it that was on Amazon, the self-publishing stuff. A year after that, I really dug fantasy in general, so I just went through a ton of fantasy, and then that slowly shifted into urban fantasy. And I found myself in the dark area of female main characters and reverse harems. And I had to stop and back up. And I'm like, oh, this is going crazy. And if you haven't read urban fantasy, I'm talking specifically about a series called by Anita Blake. Oh my God. First 2 books, you're like, yeah, okay. And by the 4th book, you're like, what am I doing? So don't go down that road if you can help it. Unless you're, I'm not saying the series is
No
bad.
judgment.
You have to enjoy what it offers. Um, and then after that, it was lit RPG, and then I read far too many of the cultivation things, which is why I'm putting my own spin on it eventually. So I've been all over.
You do realize this is all solely fantasy, right?
Oh yeah, I
I'm
don't
just
like
saying, have a number.
things. It's good. There has to be a fantastical element to it. If I wanted to read about two people down the street in some conspiracy, I would watch The Bourne Identity or something like that. I don't. But that stuff isn't really, not really into the just pure science stuff. If that makes sense. Or
Oh, I
based
get
on
it. I'm not a fan of Dan Brown either. Let's see. Okay, so a lot of people here want to know about like tips you have for like for people that want to self-publish as well, or tips you have for writers in general.
There's a couple, specifically with the Royal Road crowd. If you guys do look into self-publishing, be really careful with the whole boxes thing. If you're writing your
Boxes?
VR genre and you're using one of the little window table things, those are a pain. Converting them to EPUBs. So
Oh,
just be,
right, right, right.
yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah, I mean, if you find a way to not use boxes, as the people in the tapioca, sorry, the order of phantasmal architects and their severe allergy to boxes, um, justifiable. Uh, if you can find a way to write the story without the boxes, do. It helps. If you're looking into self-publishing, having a good fan base in Royal Road helps as well, especially if you get 1 in 100 who's willing to help purchase. Because it all has to do with how you show up on the rankings, where your books tie into other books, and the recommendations. And I would say that make sure your work is as edited as you can possibly manage. Having if anybody's read my book and then the average Royal Road book, um, I've edited it God knows how much, and I still had problems. I still had tons of problems. Um, so we got a
That was actually
professional.
one of the questions. Oh, sorry. That was actually one of the questions that someone wanted to ask of you if you were happy with the version that you submitted to Amazon. If you were happy with like that as being as your final product.
No, but the upside is you can easily update it. Like all the books that we've submitted are not 100% edited. They're like 95%. Unfortunately, that 5% of typos will catch flack. And again, it's within reason. I understand it. So we got a professional editor for book one of Continue Online. The latest version of that was uploaded last week, I want to say, with all of the changes. And it's a much better work than what it was, than what we originally wrote as well. So if you have the ability to pay for editing up front, anybody out there looking at self-publishing, look into line editing specifically, stuff for tenses, commas, grammar, all of that, and it will help you. It will pay off. I think those are the major.
Right. What else? I'm like been jumping around all over the place and I don't know what to ask. I don't know. You have any message for your fans?
Thank you for reading. Honestly, I'm always surprised to get any feedback. And part of me just expected to write into a void and hear nothing for a long time. So it's been a pleasure to hear. Otherwise, not to have, or not to. I'm not phrasing that right. Any response I've given is super exciting, and I'm sure any writer on Royal Road will tell you the same thing. Just any response. I even value the thanks for the chapters. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, speaking of, fans that you have online, how did people in your real life respond to you publishing books all of a sudden?
I don't talk about it a lot to very many people in my real life. I have like one or two coworkers that are always interested to hear what the trials and tribulations are. I think they have that, oh, you could be the next J.K. Rowling, and I don't feel that way at all. So to me, it's just something to do. It's exciting that it worked out even to the level it has. But I don't talk to a lot of people about it in real life. I'm not an outgoing person. You see the fantastic wall. I don't have posters either. I don't do any of that stuff. I think my dad sees the peripherals of it. He's kind of proud. My mom hears about it. And she's like, I keep meaning to read your books one day. And then she gets bogged down with her own projects. So. My wife, however, she's read everything that I've written, and she's been really supportive about the whole process. It's fantastic. Maybe one day my son will read and go, "Good Lord, Dad, you're crazy." I don't know what'll happen in the future.
Your wife sounds awesome. You're making me want your wife. Okay, that's horrible. But anyway, I don't know. Like, what else do you have to say about writing in general? Do you like have a goal that you try to meet every day about of writing, like a word count or a scene count?
For me, when I was doing Continue Online, I kept the first book and a half to myself before even putting out a single chapter, and then I just kind of put them all up rapidly due to impulse control. And after I got those out, I settled down to twice a week. I said, you know what, I can do 2 chapters of some set, working towards my ending. I could do 2 a week, and I fought hard to keep myself on that goal, and that was difficult. There were nights where I was up until midnight typing away furiously because once I got done with the chapter, I then had to hand it to my wife so that she could do some quality control and make my writing look cleaner than it starts out. There was a very big personal push for it. It wasn't any sort of outside motivation. I promised myself I would do the updates until I reached the end of the story, and I managed to stick with it. I think I missed 2 deadlines because of holidays, and then I took 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's.
That's really admirable, actually.
It was difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. Oh man, I was gonna ask. I actually had a question this time, and you totally threw me off. What was it? Great, now I can't think of it.
Questions. Who is the best
What?
Ninja Turtle and why? Who is the best Ninja Turtle and why is it Michelangelo? It's not. It's Donatello.
Oh yeah, you still have the questions too.
I have some of them, yeah.
Do you respond to your reader? Like people ask you questions, right, on Amazon or like on Railroad Chat even. You end up talking to your. Yeah.
I try to respond to pretty much everything that comes by. I do occasionally get comments that I have no clue what to do with, and I just kind of stare at them. And then I get people that have read through Continue Online, and I've had at least 5 or 6 different people send me private messages about it that just say, I get where this character is coming from, and I've seen both sides of dealing with this. It's amazing. I had one person who actually wrote me a review on Amazon, and they said something like, this gave me ideas of what to do in real life. And I stared at that message like, what? First, are you okay? And, second, I'm glad it helps. I really am, and I'm very surprised when people find aspects to relate to in the story. And it's weird for me because I wrote it all in first person, so I had to be in the character's head, but it's not who I am. I don't think I'm a depressive person who's gone through real life trauma. But I enjoyed feeling the same emotions with Grant, having that chance to experience stuff outside of my normal life as well. So I'm rambling again. I apologize.
No, I love the rambling. It gives me time to think about what I'm going to ask, because right now I'm still thinking about it, because I kind of ran through all the questions, which I wish I hadn't right now. I wish I'd, actually gone, talked into the conversation a little bit more.
Fine. I'll just go through some of these other questions that I see on the list then. There's one that says, why do you think Royal Scales isn't selling as well as Continue Online? I think part of it is genre. I really do. Urban fantasy is very saturated and hard to get attention in. From what I've seen, lit RPG is still a very, very small group. So I know that's part of it. I know that I've had a lot more fans on the Continue Online side that have helped out a ton. I was getting Reddit posts and traffic that way as well. People referred my WordPress, my main website, which is the FrustratedEgo.com, and that helped. It got the word out that there is this series. I think a lot of that sales success, attention success is genre. So if you're out there writing, did RPG and you think you have something that is very worthwhile, I recommend edit it um, as much as possible. Pay for a full editor. Don't think that it's something that you can do yourself, because if you're anything like me and my wife, and other people looking at it, you're going to miss stuff. And then get it out there. Why not? Worst case scenario, nobody buys it. It's a little awkward. You tried, and that's something that a lot of people can't say.
How long is your first book?
120,000 words, somewhere in there. So,
How long did it take you to write that?
I think I went crazy, and over the course of about 3 months, I wrote it all out.
Wow.
Yeah, I was possessed for whatever reason by the idea, because and it wasn't even intended to be as long as it was. If anybody's read the book, they probably are familiar. The main character goes through kind of a series of trials, player testing, see what kind of stats he gets and that kind of stuff. And then because he doesn't really feel into it, and there's this subplot of his dead wife. So I'm going to ruin a little bit for you guys. Continue Online is secretly a fantasy or a love story. Don't tell anyone. If I were to pick a genre, it's virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and a love lost, and she ends up being reincarnated in the machine. So that's part of the overplot. But Grant, the main character, doesn't know this, so he ends up being told during the course of book one, like, hey, if you pretend to be this old man, ho there, traveler, stay a while and listen. The guy at the beginning of the story in every game gives you your basic quest, your first quest. If he pretends to be that guy and does a good job at it, they would tell him more about his dead wife, who shows up very briefly in the beginning, and he's all messed up about it. So that's the whole reason he pretends to be this old guy. But during the course of this, he finds out that he is pretending to be another player who's disabled, who's literally like half a vegetable and dying right now. So he has to figure out a way to give this guy one last great adventure before he bumps off. And Continue Online Book 1 is about Grant stepping outside of his own depressive issues and all that, and learning a little bit more about how the AIs are working, finding out a little bit about his wife, but really it's sending this guy he doesn't know off with an epic ending. So that's when I started writing it, I said I want to see this scene way at the end. I want to see him pretending to be an old man and just give him one last hurrah. So I forgot the original point of that ramble, but that was what I did with book 1, and then book 2 had a similar theme. Book 3.
Hey, I forgot the original point too, but I kind of got stuck into your rambling too, so I think everyone did. Don't worry about it.
Thank you for playing along.
What?
I said thank you for playing along, everyone.
Yeah, no worries. Oh wait, there's a couple more questions that people asked all of a sudden. So, what if there was a specific thing or incident made you say, you know what, I'll start writing a novel? And this is something Zenlith asked.
So about 2008, 2009, a friend of mine from a prior job, he sat down and said, I am writing out this story, and in this story we all get godly powers. Would you like to write a character from this? And I said, sure. So one of the novels that you guys probably will never see is this horrible self-insert where me and 4 other friends get whatever divine powers and go on some overpowered nonsense fiasco trip. But we sat down and we wrote this out, and I ended up making like 3 or 4 books in the series and a whole bunch of notes, and they were all terrible and jumpy, and I went back and looked at them and I cry when I need to remember how far I've come. I started writing then, and at some point I said, you know what, I'm hitting a dead end with this series. I want to step away from the group project because that's what we were doing. And I want to try to just write something on my own. I want to write a story in a setting that I've grown to enjoy, which is when I started Royal Scales in the one. So I spent like two or 3 years writing out the first 4 books of that series. And then at some point I started getting into lit RPG and said, you know what, I want to write this. And I'm enjoying this whole process. I know that when I switch genres, when I switch focuses, whatever, when I switch to a new setting, I learn a lot. As a writer, I grow a lot. That helped really uh, putting in so much work to reach the end of a book, to wrap up a book in a prior series, helped as well.
So, coming from like seeing your development through the years of like becoming a better writer, do you still have areas that you feel like you need to improve on?
Oh yeah, oh, yeah, constantly. Every book of Continue Online was a learning process. I learned with book one of Continue Online that not a lot of people enjoyed the low action thing, so I said, okay, that makes sense. I'm with you. Um, and I tried to improve upon that. With book two, there were a lot of people that thought there was a red imp where he pretends to be a red imp with the mission of killing some power gamer player. But I learned a lot writing out that one. I learned a lot in book three, which is where I lost most of my readers. Book three goes from fantasy to virtual reality science fiction. But they're traveling in space for a book. And there's an out of game real world reason for this. And a lot of people didn't read enough of it to realize that it's still the same game. It's just got essentially different spins on them as I guess. But I learned something with every single book. But I didn't learn it as I was writing it necessarily so much as when I got to the end and I said, okay, here's the finished product. What happened? Where did I go wrong? And if you ever get bored on my website, FrustratedEgo.com, there's a section called Rambles where I put down like 3,000 or 4,000 words about the end of each book, and I say, you know what? Here's stuff I learned. Here's problems I ran into. Here's ideas that I was going through with it. So I have one of those for all of my published works.
But like, let's say for example, like, is there like any like, are there any particular areas like we'd say like dialogue needs work or like character creation or whatever? Do you ever like, how do you try to improve yourself? Do you just do it like yourself, or do you try to look into guides or?
A lot of it, I say this as a person who's read literally 10 or 20,000 books over the years. I've had a lot of opportunity to see what works and what doesn't work as a reader. So when it came time to writing it, I was saying, well, you know what, I've seen these things, I understand these things. Here's what I feel is a two-dimensional character. Here's a character that has actual value. Here's one that's paper thin. Here's naming conventions I don't like, things that I don't understand. So I read a lot that helped me take away how to approach writing. And as I wrote these things out, I said, well, you know what, I see now why some of the writers out there had a hard time with this topic, called dialogue or whatever. Dialogue is a big one for me. I always feel awkward writing it out because your characters are not just sitting across from a table from each other, and maybe one day Curve will post this silly document we worked on about talking heads. But when you read a lot of the stories out there, the good ones, people are doing stuff while they're talking. It's not just like, hi, how are you? Okay, well, great. Great, how is this? I don't know how that was. It's not just a ping pong match. It's going somewhere. But when I started writing out the dialogue myself, I did terrible at it first, and then I had to go back and say, well, you know what, I'm going to add some actions to this. They're going to move around while this is happening. They're going to, I don't know, be the guy at the back of the truck who's always unloading stuff. So that was dialogue. A lot of it, and I feel it's the same for each topic. When you're writing out characters, when you're writing out plot, when you're trying to wrap up endings, you won't know until you do it, so you have to go through and finish it. And again, that's my biggest piece of advice to anybody out there who's writing, who wants to learn to write, who wants to be published. Write. And you're going to hear that from more than just me. Neil Gaiman says it at some point. A few other famous authors said it. You have to just write. You really do. And then once you're done writing, you come back and you look at it and say, well, you know, here's where I did wrong, here's where I tried, I see what happened, and then we do it again. So before Continue Online, I had something in the area of about 700 or 800 million or 1,000 words. That would be crazy. 700 or 800,000 words of solid plot written out under different stories. And I had a lot of practice, and I still have things to learn.
No, that makes sense. It's just hard to bring yourself to write, isn't it? A little bit. Well, you can do it.
Even now, I'm still like, I have to write. I have to write, and I don't have any particular deadlines at this point because I finished Continual Online. I'm kind of waiting for the birth of our second child. I'm in a stasis where I want to do stuff, but at the same point I don't have enough spare brain power for it. So.
Well, at least I hope you don't pull a Patrick Rothfuss on us. But I have no idea when he's gonna bring out the third book, but we'll just wait. Do you have any favorite books? Like, what is your favorite book?
I do like the Name of the Wind series, despite how confused I am on whether he's going to do the third book and it's going to even partially wrap up any plots. Within the lit RPG genre, I did like the Phantom Server series. So it was an interesting take on the concept. I enjoyed the first book of the Way of the Shaman series. I think that's what it's called. Mostly for the ending. I don't really like the whole I'm trapped in virtual reality forever thing. That always feels weird to me. The first book that I really got into was one called On a Pale Horse by Piers Anthony. It's about a guy who kills death and takes his place. It's like the very beginning of the book. So you have a character who is human, but also being a function of the universe. And that's kind of where I got the idea for the voices online. And I have a lot of different books out there that I enjoy.
Okay, so Kerb made me ask this question. If you wrote an autobiography or had an autobiography written, would you object to the title Morse, A Tale of the Frustrated Author?
I don't know if I can handle the "re" in there being at all.
I don't think anyone can.
Okay. I'm going to be changing the name of my first regard story too. I swear I am. I just haven't figured out a good name. Oh, there he goes. He's typing.
Wait, I have to. There's more questions. There's like people just like all of a sudden decided to participate. If you had a choice, would you go into a fantasy world but no one can come with you? Oh,
No.
That's pretty sad.
It is sad.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I'm sorry. I'm emotional. Unless my wife was like, you know what, here, just leave all this behind. You get out. You know?
I know we're both in love with your wife. We can't just leave her behind.
Right.
But would you go if you could take her with you?
Maybe my son, yeah. But, yeah.
Your son.
Just depends. Like some people's idea of a fantasy world is like, let's go into some post-apocalyptic crazy land where everybody dies every 3 seconds. I'm not gonna go to one of those. You crazy? So.
We're just gonna have to have a Noah's Ark moment and just take what we want with us.
Right. And I need running water in the internet.
Okay, this is a weird question, but why did you choose to sit at the corner of your room for this interview? Gabriel asks.
Because slightly over here is my kitchen. And
hey, I like your kitchen. I'm just kidding.
My wife has told me the kitchen is not allowed. So, not the corner of my room. We're actually in the dining area.
See, Gabriel, you were wrong.
Yeah.
If there was one thing in life you would do, what would it be?
One thing, like a bucket list type of item?
I guess so. I'm not really sure. SR Novels asked this.
I'm not going to lie. Publishing a book, even self-publishing, that was one of the major items on my bucket list. And that was it. Now I have no goals. I can end it here. Just kidding.
Yeah, don't say that.
Of course I'm kidding. Of course I'm kidding.
You have a 9-month-old kid that's about to be born. How can you say that?
Yeah, exactly. I would like to see her grow up to be a sulky teenager.
Yeah. How has the publication process treated you?
A lot like the Royal Road process. The feedback I get is about the same across the board by story, so that's interesting. But I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. And that's all that matters. Whatever happened as a result, I've had fun doing it. That would be my son knocking on the window.
I had someone walk in earlier too. I was like, no, go away. Yeah, I think that's all the questions that people have asked, unless someone asks something afterwards.
Okay. So
Oh, yeah. I think we are actually at the wrapping up point. And you want to talk about your finishing series now and publishing you're doing?
I,
Yes.
hold on a moment.
uh,
My son's shouting at the door. It looks like I'm out of time, so I apologize, everyone. I've got to fold it here. Thank you very much for.
no problem.
If you
You
have
want to talk
contact me
about?
or drop me a message, it's fine.
You said you are having now a 5 day, I think, free first book now this week.
Yes. Thank you for
You
bringing
want to
that
talk
up.
about it, about the release of the new book as well?
I can say briefly that book 1 of Continue Online and all of its edited glory with the new cover is going to be available for free for 5 days on Amazon. So that starts Tuesday the 9th. Yeah. And it'll be for 5 days. And then book 4 also comes out on that day. And apparently both the 9th is National Book Lovers Day for here on the stateside. So woohoo! It all works out.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank everyone for showing up, and thank you, Stephen. And we'll see you in the next one, I hope.
Yeah,
Bye.
I'm sure if you have questions for me that weren't answered, I'll be in the chat room soon. I just have to go work with my family. Thank you.
Bye.